We've been talking about St. Anselm's ontological argument for the existence of God. But this week, we're going to dive into a 20th century adaptation of that argument. Alvin Plantinga has made some modifications incorporating the concept of possible worlds. So what is a possible world? Douglas Groothuis gives a good explanation. A possible world is simply a way of considering possibilities. It is a logically possible state of affairs, which either exists because it is actual as well as possible, or does not exist, but which might have existed. To put it another way, a possible world is a description of the set of facts that would make up a hypothetical world. It is a maximally consistent set of propositions. So in short, a possible world is either our actual reality, or a reality that is logically coherent, so that it could exist, even if it doesn't. Now, with that understanding out of the way, let's take a look at how Plantinga formulates his version of the ontological argument. Premise 1. It is possible that a maximally great being exists. Premise 2. If it is possible that a maximally great being exists, then a maximally great being exists in some possible world. Premise 3, if a maximally great being exists in some possible world, then it exists in every possible world. And conclusion, if a maximally great being exists in every possible world, then it exists in the actual world. Let's take a look at each of these premises specifically. Premise 1 is basically the same thing we talked about when we were looking at Anselm's argument. Plantinga's maximally great being is, for all intents and purposes, the same thing as Anselm's perfect being. Premise 2 just follows through to its logical conclusion what it means for something to be possible. If it is possible, that means it must exist in at least one of those possible worlds we were talking about. Premise 3 is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. What does it mean to be maximally great? Well, if you only exist in one possible world, but you could exist in them all, then you're not maximally great. You may be great, but not maximally great, because there's more that you could achieve, i.e. existing in all those other possible worlds. So once we concede that this maximally great being must exist in at least one possible world, it follows that he must exist in all possible worlds. But of course, our actual world is one of those possible worlds. If the maximally great being exists in all possible worlds, then that includes ours. Hence the conclusion. Now, Plantinga concedes that there's a logically possible way around his argument. Specifically, if you deny that the existence of God is even possible, then premise 1 falls apart, as does the entire line of reasoning. But as we talked about last week, trying to argue that the existence of God is not just unlikely, but actually impossible, is a pretty tall hill to climb. You'd have to show that there's some kind of logical contradiction in the very concept of God, and that's not likely. So in the end, we're left with a maximally great being that must exist in every possible world. Next week, we're going to take a look at the most common way that skeptics have responded to Plantinga. See you then. God bless.